Alright, this is Travis Wayne Goodsell, and it looks like my LDS church human trafficking video is doing fairly well. So I'll do an update version of it, going specifically as to how the church is directly involved, not just indirectly involved by getting the government of Utah and those Mormons who own businesses or are in positions of power and authority over other people are involved with it. So first of all, you have to understand what human trafficking is. Most of the times you hear in the media and Hollywood that you have to be kidnapped and you are forced to work and others get paid. That's somewhat the general scope of it, and it can take different forms. For example, when you work for a company, you get hired by a company. Excuse me. You do the labor. The bosses just sit around, make sure everybody does their job, and all they do is just sit around. That's it. We work for them. And in my case, I'm a published author through Amazon. So Amazon does nothing. Jeff Bezos does absolutely nothing in regards to my books. It's a computer program. I upload my file, fill out the information, and the computer takes care of all the rest. And they have a printing press that is able to take my file information and make it into a book. So the only labor that's involved is editors who review the book to make sure it's up to the standards of Amazon, and the line processors who pick up the book when somebody orders it and puts it in the box and ships it off, and then it gets delivered by an Amazon deliverer. Jeff Bezos has nothing to do with that whole process. And so yeah, I work for Jeff, and he does absolutely nothing. I do all the work, and Amazon has the programs, but once you get the program made, that's it. That's all you have to do. There might be some upkeep and some technical difficulties that come up here and there, but if those are all worked out, if the guy does his job right in the first place, he's no longer needed. And so and it's the same with any business, whether you're working for McDonald's or a big firm. The employees do the work, and the bosses just sit around making sure everybody does the job and gets customers to pay the company so that they get paid. And yeah, that's capitalism, and it frustrates me that everybody wants capitalism. They don't want socialism, they don't want communism, they don't want barter and trade. Did you know there's barter and trade, where you just trade for goods and services rather than actual money transactions? And then there's my economic system that I came up with, but that's not what we're talking about here. And so if your employer, who's not doing any work and is having his employees do all the work, if the employees are not getting fully paid, so that the payment that they do for laboring at the business does not allow them to live, have a house to live in, food, clothing, transportation, communication, education. There's lots of stuff in this world that we need to pay for. because of the type of economy that we have. And businesses, in order to have employees, they have to pay their employees enough money so that the employees can have a life. But when employers hold back on income that is owed to cut corners so that the bosses who do nothing make more and more profit, then you cause some problems, because now you're entering into slavery territory and human trafficking, because you're getting paid off of the slave labor of your employees. See, the employees, the less money they make, they have to then decide, do I get medicine for my baby or do I get food? And those decisions were put on the front page when Trump shut down the government. And this is how people are living throughout this nation when it's paycheck to paycheck or debt to debt. You know, that people get credit cards and they have to spend their paychecks putting money towards the minimum requirement on the credit cards, and then have to use the credit cards that they just paid the minimum amount on to buy food and clothing and all the stuff you need for the month. And that's a cycle of debt. And if businesses are not paying employees enough, then people get desperate and do stuff like getting credit cards and going to Vegas, trying to win the big one so that they can retire and quit their job. And see, when people get money, all of a sudden their job is no longer desirable because they're being abused at work. And employers are taking advantage of people for that. They pay them just enough to keep them alive and going, but not enough that people can have a good lifestyle, especially the lifestyle that the bosses make and live. And that's just not right, obviously. That's human trafficking. That's slavery, which is human trafficking as well. So how then is the church doing it? Well, first of all, they have profit-making businesses as well as non-profit businesses. The print center, the distribution center, Beehive Clothing, those are all businesses where people get paid to work there. They can't do volunteer work for those places. It's not effective. And so they have to pay people. Well, the church, of course, tries to get away with as little as possible minimum wage to start off with. That's where I came in. When I moved to Utah, I went out on the first day, went to a couple of businesses, and then went to the church. Because people said, oh yeah, go to the church. It's Human Resources at Temple Square. Go see them and apply for a job also. And so yeah, I did these other jobs first and then went to the church because I knew that if I don't get hired right away, they're most likely not gonna call back and say, hey, we've decided that we want you. No, they hire you on the spot if they want you. Otherwise, they're looking for somebody better. And if you get a call, it means that they couldn't find anybody better. And sure enough, after I got the job right away at the church, somebody called me a week later and said, hey, you still looking for a job? No. I don't waste time. You know, I get a job and get it immediately. And I know very well, because a lot of people do the tactic of, well, I need to get a job that'll pay at a certain level to support the lifestyle that I want to live and all the basic necessities. And so people go years without getting a job because of this economic system we're in, slavery. And But the church, the human resource lady, said, "You're overqualified." Yeah, but I had no choice but to take the job, and they couldn't pay me what I was worth because of the job, you know. And so I was working for less than what I was worth, minimum wage, and fortunately it was the winter time, so that's the holiday rush, and so overtime was needed during the holiday seasons, and then the insurance that the church offered was the best in the state as for families. So they offer it, but you got to pay for it from your paycheck. And then the church, this really frustrated me because sorry if you haven't heard my other videos. Having gone off my meds, I'm now back to my breathing problems, and with the cat down the hall, that's most likely the trigger. So I'm not going into a full attack all the time. There was one night where I couldn't get to sleep because of the attack, yeah, I've got a coughing problem. There's nothing I can do about it. There's no medicine, there's no drug. Well, Abilify, but the consequences or side effects of Abilify almost killed me, and that's the threat that the state has done. But I'd done that video, and so one thing that frustrated me working for the church was that the church, I thought, was a charity, a religion, and thus a charity. I found out just a few years ago that it's not a charity, it's a non-profit organization. And there are different tax rules in regarding to how they run the business as a non-profit versus a charity. And so, yeah, I was kind of pissed when they tried to promote a charity, which may have been the Utah Food Bank, or some other Utah charity, Goodwill maybe. Well, I don't think it was Goodwill. I think it was probably the Utah Food Bank. But yeah, they said, hey, the church supports this charity, and if you want, you can have more money taken out of your paycheck than we're already taking out of your paycheck to go towards this. And of course, working for the church, you can also have them deduct tithing from your paycheck. So again, there's another example of human trafficking by the church. And I've already done the video for it, but I'll go over it again here in regards to tithing. And so, yes, working for the church is human trafficking, because they pay the minimum wage, and the government establishes a minimum wage which is not sufficient, because when the government raises the minimum wage, businesses raise the cost of living in retaliation against the government raising wages. Businesses want a low enough wage as possible that they can get away with to make as much profit as they can. And it's a stupid business model. It collapses the business, and it collapses the economy. And people want to make multi-trillions. Jeff Bezos, his method is the most appropriate, but he's not as efficient as he could be. When I was locked up, I came up with a business model, and then I got out and learned about Amazon and went, oh, that's very, very similar to my business model. That's interesting. There's some differences that he could be doing that he's not doing, that would make him tons more money. But, oh well, I guess if he's satisfied with just hundreds of billions, that's up to him. He lost half of it, I guess, in the divorce. And then, of course, Trump collapsed his stocks. But, yeah. You know, Jeff, I work for you. If you want to listen to your employee, I can make you a lot more money. But nobody's going to listen to me. Nobody did. The church didn't even listen to me. I saved the church tons of money at Beehive Clothing Warehouse. I redesigned the warehouse. They were like, whoa, this is exactly what we were looking for, and nobody could figure out how to do it. And I did it, and the system worked perfectly. And but then when it came to the distribution center, they didn't want to take my idea for that one, and they lost $1 million that first year. So yeah, you don't have a automated crane service storage unit for single pick items. That was just the dumbest thing in the world. And I warned them, don't do that. Keep the pick line, order processing line. You know, they can make it automated, having an arm go around to each of the stations and put the items in the box. You know, get rid of the labor. But don't do it in a storage unit like the bulk case items. Bulk case items work because it's like the pick line idea that I had. But nope, I didn't go to college in that specific field and get hired to evaluate from the booth above. And so, yeah, lost $1 million that first year. So, but it's not your tithing. Well, maybe it was your tithing money, because tithing goes towards temples and books, Book of Mormons. So yeah, it went. Your tithing money went for that. $1 million of your tithing gone because the church did not listen to me. Huh. Okay. So, does that outrage you, Mormons? Are you now going to protest the church and walk out? Probably not. I'm going to keep trying, but not for too long, because it's time for dinner, and I'm going to go to the streets if I have to get people to come to the dinner. If you don't pay attention to your scriptures, you're not going to understand. And so, the tithing part of the human trafficking of the church is that in order to be baptized, you have to covenant certain things. And one of those things is that you will be a full tithe payer in order to become a member. And if you are 8 years old, you may or may not be getting an allowance from your parents, so you may or may not be able to pay tithing. So for 8-year-olds, you have to be willing to pay tithing whenever you do get money. And for converts, though, yeah, you got to be paying your tithing. Missionaries should be having them work with the bishop in arranging to start paying tithing before they get baptized, to show that, hey, yeah, we're willing to do what's necessary to become a member. And then once you become a member, you have to keep paying your tithing in order to qualify for a temple recommend. A year after your baptism, you qualify to be able to go through the temple if you're of the age necessary to do that. But you have to pay your tithing. That's one of the temple recommend interview questions, is do you pay a full and honest tithe? And if you say, no, I pay a part, I'm doing the best I can, I'm trying, nope, sorry, don't qualify. And you're denied the temple rituals, the rest of the temple rituals. Baptism is also supposed to be a temple ritual. And so yeah, in order, do you understand what the church is doing? Because in the ways of the world, they don't see it as human trafficking, because, well, religion, they do whatever they want, just don't steal from the government. But they're stealing from the government too, and I'll get to that. And so, you know, if members want to belong to the church and give their money to them, that's on them. But the church, what's the temple for, Mormons? That's for your eternal exaltation, to go back to God, in the highest degree of the celestial kingdom. You can't do that if you're not a full tithe payer. Although Section 132 says you don't have to be a full tithe payer in order to go to the celestial kingdom. Read it. But only murder and blasphemy against the Holy Ghost disqualify you from the celestial kingdom after you've been sealed. And I've done that video already, but yeah. And so the church is forcing members to pay the church in order to qualify for exaltation. And I did the video on sale of indulgences of the church, but I don't think Mormons know what indulgences means, and didn't do very well on views. Yeah, that's where you get forgiven of your sins if you pay the church money. And that's what the church is doing when we have to pay tithing in order to go to the temple to be perfect, to enter into the presence of God in the afterlife. Forgiveness of sins. So, yes, the church is doing exactly what Nephi saw in his vision about the great and abominable church. Sale of indulgences is in there, guys. Human trafficking. Because Mormons are forced to pay money in order to be blessed by God, to be rewarded by God. And the church doesn't compensate the members. They don't give anything back. Their reward is the Spirit. And the non-guaranteed promise of exaltation. And it's a scam, technically. And Mormons are falling for it. Except for the 13 million who have left, but the remaining 3 million have fallen for it. And so, yeah, Mormons are enslaved and trafficked by the church to pay tithing in order to make the church money. And they make it 10%. So that rich people pay less in tithing. Even though it's a 10%, the amount, you know, if a person only makes $1,000 a month or a week, that's $100 a week. And so, whereas a rich person, if he makes $100,000, that's only $10,000 a week. He still has $90,000 for the week, whereas the poor person who only makes $1,000 has only $900 for the week. And see how that works? It's horrible. And it's usually a paycheck that's around $1,000, isn't it? So, I don't know, 40 hours times, rounded up to 8, I want to round it up to 10, so 400 hours in a week if you are lucky to get a full-time job, and 800 for a paycheck. So, yeah. So yeah, the church is screwing people over, especially the poor are hurting the most with the church, and so you'd think the church would say, okay, we'll help you out with food and other stuff if you pay your tithing, and they will temporarily. That's what the bishop storehouses are for. It's a temporary fix. Bishop storehouses are not capable of handling a national emergency, let alone a state emergency. They just don't have the product. It would be immediately gone in the first hour if there were a big emergency. And yeah, the church just are not following the examples of the Bible. Joseph of Egypt. You know, Pharaoh has his dreams. Joseph says, oh, yeah, this is what it means. And I got an idea on how to fix that when it happens. Storehouses. You know, and then Malachi. Bring all the tithes into the storehouses. They still had storehouses in the time of Malachi. But we don't use them in the church for storehouses, do we? Tithing does not go for welfare. It doesn't go to help the poor and the needy. If you have your bishop's interview for a tithing settlement, he's required to read the First Presidency Statement on what tithing gets paid for. Temples, churches, Book of Mormons. Not the poor. That's fast offerings. And as a non-profit corporation, they can do that and get away with it. They can still call themselves a religion rather than being a religious charity. And so yeah, the church makes multi-billions, and I would even dare say they're entering into the trillions if they haven't already. Yeah. And they only spend 0.1% to the poor and the needy throughout the world every year. So that's horrifying. But that's human trafficking. So now for those who are on disability, they get government money, Social Security, and Social Security disability is what we paid into when we work. So that's already been tithed. Yet there are bishops who don't see it that way. The church doesn't really define it for bishops. It's left to the discretion of bishops, and all bishops therefore then say, you got to be a full tithe payer, period. And so those who are on Social Security disability, who are forced to pay tithing in order to be approved by the bishop, that's taken double. And when you have people who are on Social Security, that's government money. That's taxpayer money. And the church is asking for that from those who are on welfare or who are disabled and didn't qualify for disability insurance. And if you're not aware, it's less than minimum wage. They call it a deterrent. But if you're disabled, either mentally or physically, you can't work. How is that a deterrent to get you back to work? They can't work. They're trapped, enslaved, trafficked. That's the government's version of it. The church adds to the misery of those who are disabled by demanding 10% of that money that belongs to the government, that the government is giving to you so that you can get your basic necessities, which is less than minimum wage, which means you're forced to spend it in a manner in which they want you to, or that they don't want you to. You know, when the guy who bought the lobster off of his SNAP money, everybody threw a fit, he was proving a point. They don't give enough to take care of people. Anybody should be allowed to get a lobster if they want a lobster. Just because it's more expensive doesn't mean it should be denied to certain people. Lobster is, it's just unbelievable how people think that lobster is only for the rich and those who are worthy financially to have it. That's just horrifying thinking. It's on the lines of racism and hatred. And yeah, that's the church's human trafficking. With their employment, with the members, with the threats to pay tithing or not go to celestial kingdom. I'm having an attack here. And then those who are disabled, who are getting government money or who have already are receiving money that they've already paid tithing on, asking for more, demanding more, and they don't get assistance from the bishop because it's temporary assistance. People who are disabled permanently need permanent assistance, and if a bishop says, no, this is temporary, you need to get your own care, lift yourself up by your bootstraps, again, that's human trafficking. That's neglect. And the bishop then will make work jobs. You know, I had a calling for cleaning up the church, being responsible for setting that up. And one day the Relief Society calls me up and says, there are people coming over, could you notify me of who showed up? And an older man, overweight, because he's in a wheelchair, on breathing tubes. They made him go to church to do a make work job of cleaning the church. I didn't make him work. There's no way I was going to force somebody who can't work to work. So yeah, he let those who were able to bring him there do the work, and he got to sit there and wait. There's no way I'm working him. And of course, if I were a bishop, which is why the church would never make me a bishop, I would be a little more liberal with giving out assistance to those in need. So, yeah. Alrighty, that's it. That's the church's human trafficking. And those of you who are Mormons, you know this. You know that. You don't need to have me put in a link to show you proof that that's what's being done. You know that's what's being done. You go to the interviews. They tell it to you. You go to your bishop's temple, or can't remember what it's called now. The tithing settlement. You know you have to pay tithing. You know it's for churches, temples, and buildings and books, so that you can get exalted. That's human trafficking. There's no excuse for it. It's not God doing it, because I showed you what God wants for it. Tithing is supposed to be for the poor and the needy. Joseph, Malachi, poor and the needy. So, I don't know what more it's going to take for Mormons to wake up and realize the church is the great and abominable church. Brigham Young took it on a complete different tangent when Joseph Smith was murdered, under the orders of Brigham Young, but you guys would scream, "Prove it! Show me where Brigham Young said he confessed." criminals don't confess. You have to look at all the evidence before, during, and after. It's that simple. And when you assemble everybody's whereabouts, what they were doing, what they spoke on, then you can put a picture together. And the picture is horrifying. So, all right. Human trafficking. We're done.